Welcome to the show Meeting Interesting People. Today my guest, Jamal Grant. I know that you're an engineer who graduated UMass Lowell, and now you are one of the engineers. Is it called engineer scientist or?
Yeah, well, aerospace and mechanical systems engineer.
Okay, aerospace mechanic. Okay, and you're working at MIT,
Yep.
Lincoln Lab. So you were born in Boston, right?
So I was born in Boston.
Yeah.
My parents, first generation American. So my parents are from Trinidad and Tobago, and they moved here in the 1980s. So I've been living here since I was born.
Okay, so what school did you go?
So I grew up in Boston. I went to Boston public and charter schools.
Okay.
So I started off at the Boston Renaissance Charter School, and my education, and we'll probably go into it a little bit later, but my education is pretty relevant to where I kind of am now and the nonprofit that I eventually went on to start. But I went to Boston Renaissance Charter School. From there, I went to the John D. O'Brien.
Is that the one where next to the Boston Garden? No.
It was downtown before.
Okay, yes, I remember
It
that.
was downtown. It was like 13 stories high.
Yeah.
So it was a strange place to go to school, downtown Boston. School buses and all. It was really crazy. So I went there from kindergarten through 6th grade. And then I went to the John D. O'Brien School of Math and Science from 7th grade through 12th grade.
Okay, so what kind of school is that? Is that a private school?
So it's not a private school. So I'm not sure if you're familiar. In Boston, there are several exam schools, 3 exam schools.
No,
so
I'm not familiar, no.
There's Boston Latin School, Boston Latin Academy, and then John D. O'Brien School of Math and Science. So you take the exam in 6th grade or in 8th grade, then you go into the school. So the O'Brien had a little bit more of a focus on math and science, both in, I guess I would say in the curriculum, but also the extracurricular activities that came about. So that's kind of where my interest for engineering first kind of sparked. Yeah.
But, oh yeah, you just mentioned that because I was like, your parents, they're not engineers.
No.
Okay.
So my mother has worked as like a biller and accountant for some time.
Yeah.
She just finished her degree in 2017 from Southern New Hampshire University in accounting, but she's been effectively doing accounting for maybe 15, 20 years. And my father is a licensed plumber. He local 12. So I didn't grow up in an engineering household necessarily. And my brothers are very different. I have 4 brothers, but my older brother, he's in journalism. My younger brother, he's in graphic design, photography. The one behind me, he's in finance. Well, behind him is in finance. And then we have a younger brother, and he's studying multiplication. He's in 4th grade. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So and then you graduated school. Did you participate in this? Because I know Joseph, when he was on Minutemen, they were doing some competitions.
So in high school?
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of did, but it was more, for me, it started really young, like maybe 7th grade, and I was just looking for activities to do after school.
Yeah.
So we had this one electronics club where you got to make little light up electronics and things. And I was just doing it because, honestly, I say this all the time, but it was free pizza, and it was, no, really, I had nothing better to do. It was free pizza, and it was we were building things. We built these little airplanes and catapult systems and random things. And it kind of got my spark in engineering. I didn't know it was engineering, though. To me, it was just fun. And I'm a worrier, but because I worry, I think like down the line, what's coming, what am I going to do? So I was in 8th grade, and I told my teacher I didn't know what I want to be when I grow up. I was freaking out. And she said, well, you were in the science fair, you did bridge building, you did this after-school program. Why don't you be an engineer? And that's when I first kind of knew what engineering was. And it was also when I started to look at math and science through a different lens. Because if you're sitting and you're just doing math in a class and you don't think you're ever going to use this in the real world, it becomes hard sometimes to study or stay focused. But once I saw that engineering was very useful in actual fields like engineering and robotics, I started to look at it through a different lens and take it, I guess, a little bit more seriously. So some of those science and engineering programs in middle school, it went on into high school.
So 7th grade, what is it, 14 years old? No.
12.
12, okay.
Yep. and then in high school turned to more and more robotics. So robotics ended up being kind of my focus. So when I went off to UMass Lowell, I studied mechanical engineering, but I took robotics courses and electrical and computer engineering courses to kind of feed that desire to go into robotics and so on.
I see. Okay, so what is, besides the engineering, what other hobbies or passions you have?
I wish I had more hobbies.
Well, I know you are very busy. I totally understand. I know sometimes people think, why it's only 24 hours in a day. Yeah. Okay.
I'm not busy. I'm just boring.
No, no, no. We will need to tell our viewers that you have a big passion for young fellows, and that's why you organize your non-profit group,
Yep.
or how you call that.
Yep. So it's called the Net Mentoring Group.
Okay.
So I mean, I can answer your first question about just things that I do. For me, I really like to just learn about things, and I like to just do random things, just watch movies, hang out with friends.
Yeah.
But I'm very kind of laid back. But I do like to try to understand the world and the dynamics of the world a little bit better. So I've had some really cool opportunities to kind of travel and live other places for short durations of time.
Yeah.
So this is a really great organization. It's an international organization called Humanity in Action. And I first heard about it in 2015, the year I was graduating, and I hadn't had a job lined up yet for after school. And I applied to this fellowship, and what they do is they take fellows from across the U.S. and Europe, people who are either still in school toward the end of college or recent graduates, and you go to a given city and you kind of study the history of the city and kind of social justice issues. So we went to Atlanta and we studied the civil rights movement and how Atlanta's history played into that, but we also talked about issues related to just social justice issues. So there was feminism. We talked a fair amount about black and brown issues, LGBTQ issues, anti-Muslim rhetoric and things like that. So it really started to kind of change the way I thought about things because I came from an engineering world.
Right.
Everything's definite. Everything's math and science. It's not about perception. It's not about feelings. And those things are important. It was very much the hard skills and not so much the soft skills. This fellowship, I'm coming with my perspective from Massachusetts. There are people from across the country, but there's also people from nations with completely different laws, completely different ways of thinking. So some topics would come up, and we'd talk about how we'd address this issue. And somebody from a country like Denmark, which is more of a socialist country, will have solutions that would never fly here just by law or just with our political environment. But it was very interesting in getting me to think outside the box. So after that, Humanity in Action had another short fellowship study trip that was actually in Rwanda. And we were studying the genocide of 1994. And they asked us when we first went there, what do you all in this cohort want to learn? And a lot of people were interested in the truth and reconciliation process. That is something I was also interested in. But for me, I was very curious as to how could a genocide like this take place in the first place? How does this even, what has to be said and done for this to become a normalized event where 1 million people could die in 100 days? So I was very, very confused about that. And even though I went there thinking that I would just unfortunately learn about violence, I learned a fair about colonialism and the role of colonialism that eventually led to these kind of disparities that resulted in such a travesty. So that's another example of a time that I've learned as a hobby, but also this past summer, the third fellowship through Humanity in Action, and I went to Detroit. And Detroit was once a booming, bustling city, jobs, automotive industry, and a lot of those things have kind of collapsed, unfortunately. And you look there, and there's a lot of despair. It's in education, it's in politics, it's in housing, employment or unemployment. So for me, I was so curious because how could this city that was doing so well, the epitome of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, all these opportunities, kind of fall? And there are a number of things. Obviously, there are things such as automation, factory jobs going overseas, things like that. But the problems are more deep-rooted than that, and they also have very high racial tension. So I was very interested in that. And coming from Boston, where things are seemingly going well, at least in terms of the economy, we always have issues with violence and lack of academic success and so on. But compared to Detroit, we're doing very well. And coming from one major city to another, I was kind of naive in thinking that the solutions would be the same. And I really saw that their infrastructure there was very different than our infrastructure here, the resources we have, the universities we have. And that kind of was a experience of shared learning for me. So I know I sound just like a super nerd right now, but these are some of the things that kind of interest me. And I hope at some point in my future that I can find a way to tie my interest in logic, analytics, math into also my kind of my social justice interests.
Yeah, well, that's why we took my son to travel and see different countries when he was young, just to see that everything is different, and even traveling inside the U.S. to see how different each state. And we took him to Michigan for the summer program in Interlochen, and at that time I had a question as not born in America. I was asking my American husband why it's everywhere, everything is for sale, houses and everything. He said, well, it's a sign of bad economy. And Joseph was at that age, 8 years old, so it was like 15 years ago. And then we were seeing how, like you said, Detroit, and it's just going down, collapsing sadly. So yeah, we were seeing that 15 years ago, that it's going down to that way, so unfortunately. And then you decided that you will work with young people, teenagers, and this was the goal to organize, to put them on the right path, right direction.
Yeah, so if you look, so my organization is called the Net Mentoring Group, and the netmentoring.org is our website. So I'll give you a bit of like what we are now, but I think the story of how I got here is kind of important too. So again, I went to Boston Renaissance Charter School. It was a very good school. We had a lot of resources. I then went off to John D. O'Brien School of Math and Science. We did not have nearly as many resources, but the educational foundation was solid. So without realizing it, because I grew up in the inner city, I thought that I had this ignorant thought that because I could do it, anybody could do it. If I could make it out, so to speak, anybody could. And while I do believe personal responsibility is important and work ethic, those things are important, there are a lot of other factors that kind of play into somebody's ability to see past their circumstances. And seeing past your circumstances is step one, because I think that people strive for things that they think they can reach. So if your environment has told you that you can't reach this, not explicitly telling you, but if you're looking at your family members, if you're looking at people around you who maybe have not been able to attain success, the academic route or what have you, the traditional route to success might not seem real to you. So going to the O'Brien again, I then went off to UMass Lowell, and I'm thinking, well, the reason that we have issues where maybe people can't climb the economic ladder, maybe it's behavior, maybe it's work ethic. That's what I thought, because I was like, oh, well, I worked hard. But I also didn't realize how much support my parents had given me, the fact that I had gotten to go to pretty good schools. And I started to look at my success and realize too much of it was based off of happenstance and things that were outside of my control. I didn't choose to be born to maybe a decent financial situation. I didn't choose to maybe have the parents that I have. I didn't choose to be able to go to schools that prepared me. So all these things, these cards that were dealt to me, were very positive cards that made it easy for me to just have to worry about doing homework. So I would, at that young age in high school, I think, well, I do my homework. I work for what I have. But there are other people who have to worry about homework, supporting themselves, supporting their younger siblings or family members. So when I got to college, I kind of realized that to some degree that this was a myth. The fact that people are in their circumstances simply because they don't work hard. I realized that that was not the case. And yeah, maybe there are people who can do better than what they're doing, but there are a lot of systemic issues as well. And my freshman year, got to college, and I was around people from different backgrounds. So when I grew up in a kind of diverse neighborhood, but there weren't many Caucasian people where I grew up. Hispanic people, a lot of black people, a lot of Asian people, not many white people. So in my mind, I'm only seeing, when I see people who are not necessarily doing well, I'm only seeing the people around me. I'm not seeing the way anybody else operates. So I go to college and I realize it's not just kids of color who might have behavioral issues sometimes. I was like, oh, this is just a young people thing. We're all crazy. This isn't like, so I saw things that kind of helped me help debunk some of the myths I had in my head. Like, for instance, work ethic. I saw students who maybe went to some of the other schools in Boston or Worcester, and working hard, wanting to do well in school, and I realized there was a very huge difference in the preparation that they had academically coming out of high school. And I was like, wow, like even, determination aside, hard work aside, work ethic aside, there were things that were really working against people. So I started to get this interest in this achievement gap, which really just refers to the phenomenon that students who are white or students who are of higher economic status tend to perform on average better academically than students of color or students who come from financial hardship. And I started to feel really, really blessed and fortunate because I started to realize again how many things that were out of my control were playing in my favor and contributed to my success. So in trying to understand this achievement gap, I joined several boards. There's a group called the Boston Network for Black Student Achievement. We work with this to hold the city of Boston Superintendent's Office accountable for initiatives they put forth to close the achievement gap. Another group called the Red STEM Network. Red STEM Network writes grants, creates a community of educators and activists who are trying to get science and engineering in inner city schools. We've spoken to General Electric when they came to Boston about getting grants, or just getting money to fund STEM programs. So I was playing in that kind of activist field for a while, and I still am, but I also want to understand on the systemic side what was going on. So I tried to speak to anybody who knew anything about education. I spoke to teachers, I spoke to principals, I spoke to people in the mayor's office, Medford's mayor, sat down with her, superintendents, anybody who had anything to do with education, because I wanted to understand the interconnectedness of this issue. And everybody I spoke to, I realized there was no one solution. Some people will say, well, teachers need to work harder. Then you speak to teachers and you realize they're working 70 hours a week, and it's not just a teacher. You speak to the teacher and they say, well, my hands are kind of tied by X, Y, Z. You speak to the principal, well, my hands are kind of tied by budget. You speak to the superintendent, and it's all these different things. And I realize any solution to this achievement gap is going to have to kind of deal with some of these systemic issues and like some of these social issues in the community as well. So I know this is kind of a long backstory, but when starting the Net Mentoring Group, I wanted something that could tackle or address some of the social issues and systemic issues in tandem. So some of those systemic issues are lack of access to resources, lack of awareness of the resources that do exist so that people can optimize what they have. And on the social side, a lot of students don't really believe necessarily that they can be successful, or maybe there aren't as many positive role models. There's no blueprint laid out for how to get to your goals or your plans. So our program is a mentoring group. Our format is that there's a male and female mentor pair for every 2 to 3 students or mentees. So it ends up being a mentor family, we call them.
Right.
So I really believe in that phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. And we want to help be a part of that village for families.
Yep.
So we try to get students interested in science and engineering. We talk about social issues, try to get students to think about things that are relevant to their lives and their futures, and not necessarily, there's a lot of distractions now with social media, Instagram, Snapchat, and those things are fine. And I think that probably they're a net positive for society, being able to connect with people, but they can be distractions if not used the right way. So we try to get students to think about their lives, think about social issues, connect the dots in their minds, and also show them a path to different careers. So our mentors are all people of the community, or we happen to be all mentors of color. Where our program is open to students of all backgrounds. We have a particular focus on students from underprivileged backgrounds and minorities and young girls to get more young women and minorities interested and prepared to go into science and engineering fields. But our mentor backgrounds they span a bit. So we have, again, people in journalism. One person works in education. I think 3 or 4 of us are in different types of engineering, finance, just to really kind of trek out a path and show these students that you can be whatever you want to be.
Right.
So that's kind of us dealing with the social side. And with some of the systemic side, one thing I realized when I was doing all this research in college, trying to understand this achievement gap, was that, one, there were a lot of resources in Boston. I was speaking to my old headmaster, Dr. Roger Harris. He ran the Boston Renaissance Charter School. And I sat with him, and I must have been maybe my 3rd year of college, and I told him all these things I wanted to start. I want a program that does this, I want to do that. And everything I said, he said, I know a man doing that. I know a woman doing that. Let me connect you here, let me connect you there. And I'm all for expanding my network. And I know his intent was good, to connect me with people.
Yes.
But what stuck with me, I was actually, and I know he was trying to encourage me, but I was actually a little discouraged, because I said, if we have all of these resources and these people doing this work, why do we still have problems to the extent that we do? And there are a myriad of reasons. I'm not trying to oversimplify it. But one thing I realized is that a lot of the programs in Boston sometimes operate in silos. And the programs are doing great work, by the way. And I've given this analogy before. But there's, in my opinion, a lack of continuity in the resources that exist. So if you look at an inner city student, and you look at them, and they have these metaphorical wounds, or maybe not inner city, just people who grew up in poverty. There's maybe lack of positive role models. There's lack of good education, finances. There's all these metaphorical wounds, and then these great programs in Boston, but a lot of them put a bandage on one wound, and so it's like, oh, here's the education wound. So yeah, well, here's the education wound. You go to a good school, but there's no bandage for the gang prevention program or the prevention for maybe teenage pregnancy or unplanned pregnancies. So now, even while Program A is doing tremendous work in putting you in a great school, public school, charter school, what have you, there's maybe the gangs in the neighborhood that are kind of distracting you, or maybe there's, or poverty is kind of undermining the education. So at the net, people ask me, does the net, is it a basketball net or a soccer net? But no, it actually is. If you look at all the programs in Boston as or Greater Boston, as like a dot on a map, we want to be that connector bar connecting those dots to catch kids who kind of metaphorically fall through the cracks. So the way we want to do that is, one, connecting students in our program to existing programs out there. So if a student comes and they're interested in business, they're interested in graphic design, your mentor's job is, well, one, along with the social justice and getting you interested in science and engineering, we want to find you programs in Boston that kind of help build that pathway to success in your given field. So and on our website, we're still pretty new. Our website.
Yeah, we will put on a screen the website. Yeah.
Yeah, we're still pretty new. So if you go up there, there's not a ton up there now. But our goal and our hope is to connect with programs in the greater Boston area and have our website eventually be a hub or a one-stop shop for Boston resources. So you can go there and find art programs for your child. You can go there and find science and engineering programs, and then you can obviously find our services as well. So again, this is a very long-winded answer, but we want to tackle some of those social issues, some of the systemic issues.
Yeah.
And I talked about continuity, and I kind of gave the example with the wounds, but there's another form of continuity too, which is chronological. And if I am interested in science and engineering as a fourth grader,
Right.
and you have me in Lego robotics, and you got me in, some other engineering program, and I'm in there from fourth grade to eighth grade.
Yeah.
And then I go to a high school that doesn't have those resources. Now you expect me as a 13, 14-year-old to stay just as interested in engineering or whatever the topic is, to go out and seek these opportunities myself. And that is not always a reliable recipe.
Right.
So when these programs in Boston, so if you look at the program that served that kid, the engineering program, whichever program you choose, that served that fourth grade kid who went to eighth grade, that program did great work, the staff did great work, the programming was great,
Yeah.
but there was no pickup where
Yeah.
the student was left off.
Right.
So in that sense, there's some chronological discontinuity too that can sometimes undermine the programs that currently exist in the work that they're doing. So if a student is in our program, again, they're interested in art or business or engineering, and we connect you in another Saturday or weekday program from third grade to eighth grade or whatever ages
Yeah.
you're with us. Once you age out of that, we want to work with the parents, we want to work with the teachers, we want to work with the guidance counselors,
Right.
and ultimately the student to find them another resource to pick up where we left off,
Right.
or where the last program left
Right.
off. So that's the idea of the net, kind of building continuity so that these pathways, we want to optimize the existing resources so that we're not reinventing the wheel.
And of course, all this need a lot of finances also.
The program itself.
Yeah.
So I will say we are a low budget
Yeah.
program, so we don't need a ton. We really just pay for
But
food.
if
and
people
engineering.
will donate,
But with that being said,
Yeah.
we always are looking for different forms of funding.
Yeah.
So we appreciate any donations, small donations, large donations.
Yeah.
Again, our website's thenetmentoring.org. And that would be tremendously appreciated. We also are a tax-exempt 501c3, so all donations can be tax-exempt and can be written off.
deductible. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that was very interesting, and of course, I have my own view. First of all, you did choose your parents. You did choose location when you come here. So you like it or not, but we write in our own scenario before we coming over. That's my opinion. And another thing is, I totally agree with you that continuation is very important. And if I will be the one who make a decision about education, I will just give kids a basic reading and writing, and then see what they leading towards something, art, music, science, and just let them be in this stream. And just support all the time, and maybe do not torture them with other discipline. They maybe do not need it.
Yep.
For example, myself. So I after 8th grade, I went to music college, and in music college, of course, we didn't have an astronomy. This class was not exist there, but we were continuing to finish the high school diploma also. So, but on the top of that, we had a discipline to be future music teachers. So we had a psychology, and on the top of that, like high school discipline, algebra and literature, and so. And then I didn't succeed in conservatory, and I just turned to art history. And so, but it's all connected anyway. So another thing is, I think the music is very important. Because music and mathematics, it's very close.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because if you know that you can all take these formulas, we use the formulas, composers use formulas when they create the music.
I did not know that.
Yes.
No.
So the math and music very connected. And when you can see our son and my daughter, when they were little, my daughter started first German language and music, choir, and then she was drawing. Under the music, they were putting music, and was the system from Germany at that time in Central Asia where we lived. And Joseph started music very early. At 3 years old, he started playing piano, and then four and a half cello. And even he didn't become a professional musician, but it's built very important foundation for the future. And of course, it's coming from family, most of the things.
Yeah.
And sometimes you write about all this environmental, neighborhood, and all this thing, but we need to remember another thing, that yes, we are here to learn. The whole school, it's called life. And that's why some people come with a different type of experience they should go through. And definitely, if they need help, the people should help them. And like you mentioned yourself, it's one of the teachers was telling you that, oh, you should be going science because if you're interested to do this and that. So, and when my daughter was little, I was showing her like encyclopedias on science, biology, and my grandfather was a professor of microbiology. He was taking her to his lab, showing microscope, how she can see some life there. And so she became a neuroscientist. So it's all built, if we're talking about what is you seen as a goal, it starts in the kindergarten, even earlier than that. So, and it's important to work not just with children, it's need to be reach out the families. Especially the families who just become a family and soon enough they will expect a child. That's when you need to reach out these people and see if they really need help, if they know what they're doing. And I think there will be a great help for the future. So that's how I see. And I know there's we have a very famous, I interview this person by Skype through Sweden. He's the one who trying to tell people how music important, even in the prenatal period, before the child will be born. And I don't know if you're familiar, but each child coming with the name, and in Africa, for example, in the tribes, the woman choosing the man from whom she wants to have a child. So when she first singing her song, and this will be a song for a child, a song of this child. So then she's going to choose the father, and then she's getting a baby, and that song will be always with this child as the rhythm and the sound. And whenever he feel down or whenever he feel uncomfortable, this song is just like remedy for everything. Deepak Chopra in California, he does that. He using preparing, and this guy from Sweden, he does too. He creates this CDs where you can listen the music, like prenatal music and stuff, and then after the child born, and going step by step. Unfortunately, he speaks only Russian and Swedish. So, and his book, The Secrets of Genius, it's only in Russian, unfortunately. But someday maybe people will translate it. And whenever he travel and give a concert around the States, most of the time it's of course in Russian, and very rare. In Pennsylvania they did some translation, but I wasn't sure that it was successful because it's really difficult for the person who will translate. You need to be the same type of vibe that the speaker. So if you do not, then it will be just poor translation. So, well, I think you're doing a great job, and I'm positive it will be successful. And I hope that people will understand that deeply, and someone who want to sponsor or donate some finances to support the group, then they will see the fruits of labor, because it will be just showing how kids are in the life found their own way, and they don't lose themselves or worse to say, their lives. So we know how much is important.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being my guest. I know you have a very busy schedule, so thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
And
I wanted to add one thing.
yes.
It would be great if people do want to donate. That's not the only way to help.
Yes.
We're looking for other organizations to partner with to put on our website.
Yeah.
So if you're part of an organization that might be interested in being on our website,
Yeah.
being a part of our network, we'd be interested in that.
Yeah.
If you're a parent who might want your student to be involved, we meet in Roxbury. So
Okay.
but we do have students from Brockton, we have students from Milton.
Yeah.
So it's not only for Boston students. But also if you're just a young person who's interested in being a mentor,
Yeah.
or just a young professional, and you think that you might have engineering projects to come just do a one-day thing.
But the
You could be a guest
mentors,
speaker.
they are all volunteers, correct?
So our mentors are all volunteers.
Yep.
Yep, we're all in 25, 26 age range. We're either, most of us are young professionals, recent graduates, or still in school. So there are many ways to help out. So again, my email's on the website. There's
Yep.
also a way to send me a message there.
Right.
But definitely thenetmentoring.org. Check out our website.
So we
some of the
invite
things
anybody. It can be people who retired, but they're willing to help.
Yeah,
They are welcome to be mentors.
Yeah, they're always well, the mentors, just for relatability, we try
Yeah.
to have the mentors maybe closer in age to the students. But there are still ways that other people can help.
Yeah.
Whether it's coming up with projects or just giving kind of a overview of their life, or an inspirational story. So
Yeah.
we find ways to get people integrated. We were running for, I guess this was our second year. We just finished.
Yeah.
So really a year and a half. We're open to changing. We're a young organization. We're small. We're energetic. So we're willing to kind of shift and serve our students in the best way. So I'm open to all discussions with anybody who might have interest in chatting with us and getting involved. But
Okay. Jamal Grant, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.